Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Monday. You can choose to be upset about it. I choose to be excited. Why? It's the GSMC Soccer Podcast. That's why. Hi there, I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Fun show planned today. For those of you American football fans, it was a fun day yesterday for you. The Super Bowl, as always, one of the largest events, not just in the United States, but around the world in terms of television, in terms of entertainment, in terms of viewership, in terms of being connected to one event. The entire sports world certainly seems connected to the Super Bowl. And beyond the sports world, everybody on the periphery of the sports world, and even those far outside the sports world, usually pay attention to the Super Bowl. Except my girlfriend, apparently. So she happens to be, I think, one of the only people in the country. So I want you to wrap your mind around this. She is 20 plus years old. So we're going to discount anybody that's under the age of 20. Okay, we're not going to count these numbers under the age of 20. But everybody over the age of 20, I feel like has at least seen a play, a snap, a commercial, a halftime show, even in passing, even at a party they weren't paying attention. They saw it out of the corner of their eyes. They flipped it on while clicking through the TV at home on a random February Sunday. The Super Bowl is so popular, so huge, and if you look at the numbers with the amount of people that watch this game, the number of people that are over the age of 20 that have not seen a single snap, commercial, or halftime show live has to be less than 10 million. And apparently, she's one of them. But she finally ended that drought yesterday and consumed the whole thing. But unbelievable. Couldn't believe it. Because, listen, 100 million people watch that thing every single year. And that's really not able to track how many people are at parties, how many people see it going by a TV at a Walmart or something that it's on. It's such a popular event that it would be hard for me to believe there are more than 30 million people in this country over the age of 20 years old that have never seen a single second of it. It would just be hard for me to believe. At least one time, a Super Bowl party when they were 4, right? Something like that. Anything. Just 1 second, immediately, you're crossed off the list. And she had not seen a single second. We ended that drought, though. And just to connect to soccer before we dive into all the great topics we have on the show today, something really struck me watching the Super Bowl. And it's because they showed a very similar shot that we've seen all across soccer before, which is the big crowd in a big square all watching the game on a big TV, like a stadium outside the stadium. And the Kansas City Chiefs had one of those in Kansas City, Missouri, by the way, in case you didn't know. And you live in a house on Pennsylvania Avenue. But it's one of those things that is so monumental, a goal in soccer, right? A watch party in Missouri, very similar to the World Cup. And it struck me that the Super Bowl is so special because it combines the sport of football, which has a lot of intrigue, a lot of storylines, a lot of history, a lot of physical contact. It's awfully exciting. Every play seems exciting because every play it feels like something can happen. It has a defined start and ending action, and all these things are really positive for a healthy sport. And the Super Bowl combines that with the intensity of every moment that a soccer goal provides in the World Cup. So the fans celebrating a touchdown in the Super Bowl has the same weight as a goal in a very important soccer goal. It has the same weight, right? Any big soccer match, Champions League, World Cup, anything. what makes it awesome is the weight of a goal. And the Super Bowl somehow takes the sport of football, which is already very interesting and popular and really connects with the country, then adds in the weight of soccer goals for every point and moment and touchdown. So it combines these two things and it makes it an awfully exciting event. Awfully exciting event. Was a lot of fun to watch. Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl. Beautiful Sunday. Let's dive into our first topic. It's a topic that I've mentioned many times before. It's Barcelona. They won this weekend on Sunday. They stay within striking distance of Real Madrid. A loss would have been a disaster, but they hold on. 2-1 victory against Levante. 17-year-old scores a brace. Good for Barcelona. And this team is chock full of talent. And their talent might win them La Liga. There's certainly a possibility. Wouldn't consider them the favorites because there's chaos. But they have so much talent all across the board. So many great players. Young, old, experienced, and arguably the best player in the world in Lionel Messi. That it's hard for me to say definitively that they won't figure this thing out. But when I read a story today that the Valverde firing, which we have talked about time and time again on this show, how I don't think firing a manager midseason usually works, how you need your entire team in agreement that the manager needs to go, that you need to be in a position where you're behind the league, where it is very evident that you need a change. That's when you need to fire a manager. When it's split, when you're tied at the top of your league, when you're in the round of 16 of the Champions League, it's just not the time to fire somebody. We've said that on this show multiple times before. And here we go. I'm reading a story that the team is divided because of the Valverde firing. The team is divided. The team is in disarray. Story after story about how Barcelona camp is not in unison. They aren't connected. They aren't striving towards one goal. They're relying solely on talent, and the talent might take them far, but they will continue to drop matches they shouldn't. They will continue to underperform if this break in the middle of the team stays there all season. And I think it will, because Kiki Setien would have already turned this thing around. And if half the team thinks Valverde should still be there and half the team doesn't, and the other half of the team doesn't have much of an argument because Setien can barely get them to play together, it has disaster written all over it for Barcelona. I wouldn't be comfortable betting on them in the round of 16 of the Champions League, which comes up in 2 weeks, by the way. Super excited for it. And I certainly wouldn't be comfortable putting them as the betting favorites to win La Liga, with Real Madrid having 3 points in hand and Zinedine Zidane and Real Madrid having the exact opposite approach. They had a bad season last year. They kept their manager. They refortified the back line, and now they've only given up 13 goals in the last 22 games, and they feel connected. Even without Cristiano Ronaldo, they feel like a unit. They feel like a team that's working together, that has a goal, that's moving forward. That is important. Super important. And Real Madrid has figured that out. And although Barcelona has a lot of talent, you can even make an argument they have more talent than Real Madrid, they are split. They are divided. They are unable to move forward. And this is why, time and time again, I tell you, throughout this sport and other sports, consistency through a season is important. Building a culture, running an organization, having an idea of how to do things, and committing to those ideas and see them through to the end is super important in all sports, in all businesses. Because people need to agree, especially wealthy, powerful men like soccer players, stars, celebrities. You need to give them an idea, a culture to believe in and buy into. Now, there might be a situation like Bayern Munich, which we will talk about later in the show, where the entire team has bailed on the manager, where you have no choice but to fire them. You go back to David Blatt for the 2016 Cavs. The entire roster and your star player had bailed on the coach. You got to get rid of him. I understand there are certain situations when that needs to / has to happen. But I just don't think Barcelona needed to do this. I really don't think Barcelona needed to do this. And it's kind of shocking that they did. And now they're paying the price for it, and it will probably lose them La Liga, and it could get them bounced in the Champions League. But hopefully it's a lesson to all of world soccer that be a little more patient. Trust a guy. Build a culture. And stay consistent. Play it through till the end. But we'll see. Barcelona gets by with a 2-1 win. They're still in striking distance. Their talent could certainly take them awfully far. But I just don't think the manager situation and this type of turmoil will win them La Liga this season. On the other side of the break, Christian Pulisic, another setback. When will he come back? Frank Lampard of Chelsea doesn't even know. We'll talk about his big worry for me, which is his health, on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Hanging out in Chicago, the great city of Chicago. NBA All-Star Game comes here in a couple weeks. I understand that's not related to soccer, but it's a big event. And it's an event that, soccer tends to pay attention to. It's a big celebrity event. So that'll be a lot of fun in the city. Chicago Fire moving back to Soldier Field. They open up against Atlanta United, along with the rest of the MLS, in the month of March. And that is awfully exciting, too. The MLS expanding. It's a bigger league this year. And a lot of teams spent a lot of money, and a lot of teams got better this year. There's going to be a lot of high-quality soccer in the MLS. It seems to get better every single year. My worry, though, for some of the teams that have recently expanded into, it could be real rough for them. I don't know if FC Cincinnati's ready to compete. I'm not sure Nashville will be ready to compete. Not sure Miami will be ready to compete. And the league will need some years to gain some balance once they finish the expansion. And balance is super important. Super important to have a successful league. You need that balance in terms of rosters, balance in terms of talent, especially in the United States, because here in this country, loyalty in terms of a team and brand, loyalty comes from some sort of success, some sort of winning. Every team that has loyalty across sports in the United States has had some sort of background of winning. The Detroit Lions might be the only one, but listen, Detroit isn't jumping for joy for the Lions. Most of those people are kind of out. And they have had success and great players before, and there's some reason to cheer for them, but they don't dominate a region, right? So the Chicago Bears dominate the area of Chicago and the surrounding region. 1985, the one run really carried it. You have some winning, you have some balance, and balance helps everything, right? But balance in the MLS is a worry for me. Let's stick with the United States, not the MLS. But Christian Pulisic, who has had another injury setback for Chelsea, and this kid, unfortunately, has dealt with a lot of injuries, and it is my biggest worry for his career moving forward. Obviously, a highly talented player. Obviously, had the highest transfer fee paid for any American ever, and the youngest to ever get that type of transfer fee. And he's a contributor when he's healthy at one of the best clubs in the world. Yet it just continues to worry me if he keeps getting hurt, because he won't be able to gain momentum. He won't be able to improve at the level at which the United States men's national team needs him to improve, at the way Chelsea needs him to improve. Because he's not ready to be a world superstar yet. He's ready to be a good contributor and a starter, in my opinion, at the highest levels of soccer, and be a good player for the United States in the World Cup. But if the United States wants to achieve everything they want to achieve on the world stage in 2022, over the next qualifying round in 2020. We'll talk about their win against Costa Rica this weekend. If they want to achieve everything they want to achieve, Christian Pulisic not only needs to be healthy, but needs to be the best version of himself, which is top 15 player in the world, world superstar, goal scorer, distributor, captain, leader. And all these things that you're asking of Christian Pulisic, require health. Needs to be healthy. The kid from Hershey, Pennsylvania needs to be healthy. And we've seen bad health, bad luck with health and injuries impact so many careers in so many sports and take away so many people's potential in the game. And it's worrying me that we might be in this situation with this kid. Because it just is story after story of how he's unable to recover from the injury, how there's new injuries time and time again. He's been hurt quite a bit. He's missed a lot of United States matches because of injury. And he's not going to be able to take the strides he needs to take to get better, to become that world superstar. And I think there'll be another American prodigy right down the pipeline. In fact, we might have saw one this weekend, 18-year-old Uli, who's playing for the Wolfsburg, which is a German team, U19 team. And Uli looked fantastic. He's got fantastic hair, too. And he's 18 years old. And there's going to be a lot of great players, I think, that come through. Gio Reyna right now getting a little bit of time at Dortmund. He might start to get more time, and he might be the next Pulisic. And I think there will be a lot of guys like him, like this, in the United States moving forward. But you don't want the one guy that's already shown potential to just be injury prone. It'd be awful for him. It'd be awful for us. You hope, I hope that he can find a way to stay healthy, to maintain his health. I love the way he plays. I love the way he plays. I love the way the ball seems to stick to his foot. He has great creativity. His accuracy on crosses and passes is brilliant. His finishing ability needs work. I think his finishing ability needs more experience. But he's still pretty good at it. And he brings energy. He's a high work rate. He cares about the United States. He cares about being successful at club, at country. And that's something that is rare. It's something we haven't seen all the time. That passion. And he has everything that you would want an American soccer superstar to have. One, he has essentially an American name, Christian, right? You can say it. Now, the last name, I get a little bit of spin to it, right? It's not necessarily American, but the kid's from Hershey, Pennsylvania, and his first name's Christian, and he went to his high school prom the day after he scored his first goal for the United States. It's an American story like no other. He fits the bill. He fits the bill where sponsors will buy into him. He fits the bill where people will wear his jersey in the United States. But he's got to be healthy. He has to score goals. He has to stay in the headlines. It's not just important for him, but it's important, I think, for the United States and the health of the men's national team program. Which, I'll be honest, I finally got to watching this weekend. Because in 2017, or early 2018, whenever that match was, I don't even want to remember when that match was, when they couldn't find a way to win against Trinidad and Tobago. And Pulisic was the only guy on the field that seemed to care about the victory. The only guy that seemed to care about trying. And I know the other guys did care, but it just didn't feel like it. And it didn't connect. And it was just so frustrating to watch them lose that match and for the first time in my life not be participating in my favorite sports tournament, the World Cup. That was so crushing, so heart-wrenching that I had barely watched United States men's national team highlights over the last 3 years. Like when they're in the Gold Cup, it's great. I remember I tuned in to the final against Mexico, but I just read articles and watched box scores because every time I turned them on the TV, I got sick to my stomach. I got absolutely sick. I was so disappointed, so absolutely gut-wrenched, so just awful feeling. There's no adjective to describe how that moment felt. Because I remember that game. I'm sitting around at my buddy Russ's. This was when I was in college. And we're watching the game. We planned this as a celebration. I was like, we're going to watch them. They're going to qualify. They're like 98%. We'll watch it. They'll secure it. It was in the last game, but so what? We're in. We can celebrate it. And I believe it was on a weekend, so we could roll right in. Boom, go out and celebrate. Awesome night. And I actually convinced 3 people that don't really watch soccer. I explained to them the situation. I explained to them the gravity of it. and I got them interested and watching the game. And then it started to happen. And remember, through the first 80 minutes of this disappointing affair, through the first 80 minutes of it, the United States was still going to qualify because the other results had yet to turn against the United States. The absolutely worst case scenario was not happening. And then one goal, one report, and all of a sudden the announcers say, as of this moment, which was in the 80th minute, as of this moment, the United States would not qualify for the World Cup in 2018. And absolute panic set in. And it was the worst 10 minutes of my life. And you kept waiting for it to change. You kept waiting for it to change. And then all of a sudden the announcers say the United States will not be participating in the 2018 World Cup. Like that. Snap of your fingers. And it's gone. Heart-wrenching stuff. Awful stuff. Stuff that makes you vomit. Stuff that makes you, oh no. And it was just shocking. And I had to go home and go to bed. It was awful. And it made it really difficult to watch this team over the last 3 years. But yesterday, I saw a bit of hope. That hope that I've been talking about this United States men's national team time and time again on the show, it showed a bit. The young team battled an experienced Costa Rican squad, looked promising, and it looks like they know what they're doing. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Give the show a follow on Twitter at GSMC_soccer. Like us on Facebook as well. GSMC Soccer. Give it a like. Give it a follow. That's where you'll find all our podcasts. Posted, shared, liked. Comment on it if you wish. I'm Lukas Moore. Big welcome into the program. Just talked about the injury troubles for the United States' biggest star who is not involved in the match on Saturday against Costa Rica, where it was an international friendly. And for the first time in 3 years, I could sit down and watch a match live and not just watch highlights or watch, box scores and read articles. I could finally enjoy, without getting sick to my stomach, the United States men's national team. And I've talked about them a lot on this show. I've talked about how there is no reason the United States shouldn't be one of the most successful soccer teams in the world. And I said this again to somebody else the other day, off air, and they were like, well, we just don't care about soccer. I was like, yeah, but do we care about pole vaulting? But we have some of the greatest pole vaulters ever. Are we really that interested in long jump, or are we just good at it? Do we care about curling, or have we figured this thing out? How often does figure skating come up in your mind, yet somehow we're still finding a way to produce good figure skaters? So I don't think it matters if we care about something, because somebody out there in the country cares. And soccer is more popular than hockey. And hockey's won gold medals. Hockey's one of the best 4 countries in the world at it. And I get every country in the world plays soccer. I understand that. I understand it's more competitive. But it doesn't matter, because we have more people, more money. More people, more money should equal more success. It's how it works in every other sport. And it's how it should work in soccer, unless there's a problem with the structure, a problem with the way of doing business, a problem with the mentality, a problem with the confidence, a problem with the thing we always like to talk about on this show, the mentality, the organization, a problem with how it's being done. And I think there's a problem with how it's being done in the United States, at least up to that moment. So what I was looking for in the match against Costa Rica, not necessarily how they're going to play. It was a bunch of young players, a bunch of guys making their debuts in front of just like 2,000 people in Southern California. And it was a cool Kobe moment and a cool Kobe tribute in the 24th minute. I loved that. And the United States ended up winning 1-0. Great. They looked better than 1-0. Honestly, could have been 3-0. A little bit of jitters, it felt like, from the younger players. You needed some of that last-second finishing touch. And the United States, for years, has just been unable to finish in the final third. But they pressed higher than I've ever really seen them press. They were more aggressive and more confident. And you can tell that they're just more talented than the United States has ever been. The fact that this was the U21 team, essentially. Now, there were some older players. But essentially, this was the young team. This was the B team. This was not what you're going to see at the World Cup. There will be a lot of players that you want to see in World Cup qualifying, a lot of players that will be involved in World Cup qualifying on this roster, but this wasn't the best that the United States has to offer in terms of talent. And yet, it looked like the most talented I've ever seen the United States. The passing, the touch, the movement, they looked good. They looked talented. They looked, proficient at the game. And I'm telling you, it's because they are more talented than past United States teams. It's because soccer has caught on in this country. We're just not aware of it. You guys just don't see it coming. There is a ton of talented players. Way more than there's ever been. Way more people contributing in Europe than there's ever been. Listen, Europe, Britain, the Bundesliga, the Premier League, the Championship, Serie A, all these great big clubs, they didn't all of a sudden just decide to start liking Americans and letting them in their soccer league and letting them into their billion-dollar organizations and paying $10 million plus for a guy who might not participate for the United States in the World Cup and Anthony Robinson, paying $55 million for its youngest star. That didn't just magically happen because they decided, we like Americans now. No, it's because Americans are more talented than they've ever been at this game. And it's because of the popularity of the MLS. It's because of the popularity of the World Cup. It's because when this thing finally caught on here a little bit in 2010, there were a lot of 10-year-olds who needed to start practicing who are 20 now. Right? You remember the 2010 World Cup? When it was really followed, when it really caught on in terms of popularity, in terms of television ratings, in terms of excitement. They made the round of 16. There was juice for the men's national team at the World Cup. There was juice in soccer for the first time really ever in the United States. Those kids that had that juice, they're 20 now. Or they're 16. Or they're 22, right? They started practicing more. It was motivation. It was a goal. And not only over these 10 years were they more motivated because of that one World Cup, but over these 10 years, they've had the ability to watch soccer at any time, at any moment. It's been at their fingertips to learn from the best, to watch how Ronaldo does it, to watch how Messi does it. Something that was never available to American soccer players until the 2010s. That's why the United States has, I think, the most talented group of players they've ever had. But nobody wants to talk about it because the last time we saw the men's national team on the national stage, they couldn't beat Trinidad and Tobago, which is one singular soccer country. But I found out the other day that people from Trinidad don't like to say they're from Tobago and the other way around. I didn't know that. I live in Chicago. There's more people here than in that country that they lost to. So that's the last time we talked about it. So it feels ridiculous. It feels so ridiculous to say, I think the United States is more talented than it's ever been. And some people would laugh at that. But I am telling you, watching them, I couldn't get over it. I'm like, listen, they look crisper. They look better. And this is the B team. There are more people playing in higher leagues right now than ever. This team can compete. This team has talent. More talent than there's ever been. So what needs to come together? The organization, the culture. Greg Berhalter, the manager, and Brian McBride, the general manager. And Brian McBride did a halftime interview with ESPN. I liked what he had to say. He sounded smart. He sounded like he knew what he was doing. I think Brian McBride is a solid choice for general manager. And the showing they had and the culture he wants to build seems like it's going to be the right decision. I can't tell you for sure because these things are hard to predict. And I like Greg Berhalter's strategy, and it looked like players were excited to play. The United States has got some 50-50 players in terms of they have an option to play for this country or the United States. It feels like things are happening the way they're supposed to. It feels like it's moving in the right direction. But we'll see. A lot of important matches coming up. Qualifying for the Olympics, which will be a younger team, coached by Jason Kreis, a younger manager, not Greg Berhalter, but good indications for the future and good indications of the health of the program right now. So that's what's in front of the United States. And then in September, World Cup qualifying. Absolutely crucial for 2022 that they qualify for the World Cup. We'll take a break. On the other side of the break, we've got some fun stuff to talk about. We just talked about young players. We'll keep talking about young players, but this time Liverpool on a Tuesday playing Shrewsbury, and Jurgen Klopp won't be managing them. And none of the starters or rotation players will be playing. We'll talk about that FA Cup replay on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Soccer Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_soccer. Like us on Facebook, GSMC Soccer. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Big welcome into the program. Back welcome in if you were just listening. It's a podcast. We do it classic radio style. I like it a little bit more. We just talked about the kids of the United States. Let's talk about the kids from Liverpool. They'll be battling Shrewsbury in an FA Cup replay, which a replay of a cup in a season in a league that already has the most strenuous schedule is frankly one of the more confusing things to me in world soccer. Listen, I am not a classic American. I understand why an FA Cup is important. I understand why an EFL Cup is important. I understand why the Copa del Rey is important. I understand why these trophies matter. I get why people like these tournaments. Am I gung-ho about it? No. But I understand it. But I can't ever wrap my arms around or understand replay. Replaying a match. Doing a match over again. In a season and a schedule that is already the most busy, most physically intensive, most unbelievably soul-sucking schedule that the Premier League has. They're going to replay matches for a tournament that now your best team is saying it's not important because the manager isn't even going to manage it. He's going to let his assistant, his young coach, manage it. The U23 coach. And it's only under 23 players playing for Liverpool tomorrow in the FA Cup replay. Now, I don't think Shrewsbury is going to be able to get this done. I still think Liverpool has, these kids are going to be fired up to play. They love this, that they get to play. And I love it too. I think everybody should do this on an FA Cup replay. Because Manchester United didn't do it on an FA Cup replay, and they got a player hurt. Marcus Rashford, who was chilling out in Miami for the Super Bowl. He's so hurt. He's so hurt he doesn't even need to be around Manchester United while they get a 0-0 draw at home. And it just felt really empty. It felt so empty and so it wasn't negative necessarily because they didn't lose, but it also felt like an empty result. And I get Wolverhampton's near the top of the league and it's not a horrible draw, I guess, but it's just Manchester United has no juice right now. No juice at all. You need a little bit of juice when you're Manchester United. And even though I've consistently said that they are a different program, they are a completely different team than what they have been, in a different organization than what they have been, they still need some sort of juice, and it just felt so empty. Liverpool has learned from Manchester United, hey, Marcus Rashford got hurt in an FA Cup replay. We should probably not do that when we're trying to win a Champions League for back-to-back years, when we're trying to have an undefeated season for the first time in the Premier League since 2003, 2004, when Arsenal did it. We're not going to care about an FA Cup replay. That is a big statement from Jurgen Klopp. That is a huge statement that I 100% agree with, because we'll play the FA Cup. We get why it's important. And we might not play our very best squad, and we might give some guys some rest, but I'm going to manage it. We're going to try to win. We're going to be excited about it. I 100% get that. But then playing another match 2 weeks later because it was a draw is for a knockout cup, it's nonsensical. What are we doing here? Just don't even play extra time. Just go into penalty kicks, and if Liverpool loses, Shrewsbury gets to celebrate, great, and it's over. Right? And the lower tier teams, who this is their biggest tournament of the year because it's their only time where there's some sort of realistic shot, because it's single elimination, for them to win a trophy. And yes, that's why I love these cups, because it gives teams who really have no shot at ever winning a Premier League title an opportunity to win trophies and compete against big dogs and win upsets. And we see this in the U.S. Open Cup with teams that are in the minor leagues of soccer that are able to compete with MLS teams. And we see it all over soccer, that these cups allow upsets to happen, and I think they're frankly awesome. But are lower tier teams really going to disagree if you just decide this thing in penalties? Does a lower tier team really want to replay a match against a better team when they fought tooth and nail for a draw? Or wouldn't both parties just sit down and agree, listen, let's just do a penalty kick shootout. We understand that it's not going to pick the best team, but we could really care less about this trophy. And penalty kick shootout, you guys probably have a better advantage since it's such a 50-50 coin flip. The worst team is going to have an advantage in that situation. We keep everybody healthy. Maybe you get your upset, maybe you don't, but it's the end of it all. But instead, we got to come back 2 weeks later and play another full match when we already have an extra cup compared to everybody else, which is now the Carabao Cup. So they have two league cups. Now you got to replay one 2 weeks later. And there's no winter break. There's a big 38-game match schedule, which is bigger than some other leagues in the world. And a lot of our teams are playing the Champions League and Europa League. So it's just too much. There's no reason to have a replay in the middle of this schedule. No reason whatsoever. I hope that Jurgen Klopp doing this can move the English Football Association in that direction to get rid of these replays and just decide it in penalty kicks or rock, paper, scissors even at midfield. Seriously, anything else than forcing these teams to come back 2 weeks later and risk health and risk future endeavors and give an advantage to the bigger team when we want more upsets in these type of tournaments anyway. It's just something that I really hope is done away with. And I'm excited to see the Liverpool young guys. I think that they'll win. I think that the Liverpool young team is super talented. I think they can compete with a team like Shrewsbury. And I think they're just going to be so excited to play that they'll win. They're going to be excited. They're going to be ready to go, and they'll play with more work rate and more pace, and I think they'll win the match. But I'm actually going to watch it because the young players are playing. It's actually intriguing me. I'm actually going to sit down, plan to turn it on. I even got a buddy watching it with me, instead of watching the condensed match. Just going to sit down and really, because I'm interested to see if Liverpool can do it. I'm interested that Jurgen Klopp's not going to be on the sideline. I think it's really interesting. Fun stuff, I guess, but there's no reason to see a replay. I hope we get rid of that in the future. Manchester City loss shows us why it's not just about money. We talk about that on the other side of the break. They had a rough 2-0 loss. We talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Soccer Podcast. Big welcome back into the show. Couple segments left to get through after a fun, exciting weekend in the world of soccer. Manchester City goes down again. Tottenham grabs them 2-0. And this game is important for a couple reasons. One, it really affects the standings, right? It's a big loss. It's Manchester City now 22 points back of Liverpool. That's absolutely unbelievable at this point of the season. It's honestly an unbelievable margin at the end of the Premier League season. Usually this league is within 5 or 10 points from the top teams, but no, here we are. Liverpool is so far out in front that they could lose every match the rest of the way, and there's a chance that they wouldn't lose the whole thing. They probably would. But there's a world that exists where they wouldn't. 22 points is a massive lead. That's a 7-match lead to where they need to lose 7 in a row. The team behind them, Man City, would need to win 7 in a row. And Liverpool would still be in first place. Absolutely crazy. And it's unbelievable it's happened. So the Premier League is exciting in other places. Who's going to be in the top 4? Can Manchester United get their stuff together? But Manchester City suffers a loss this weekend, and they are far behind. And I like Pep Guardiola, and arguably they're just as talented, and many people would make an argument they're more talented than Liverpool. They've used their funds in nearly just as smart of a way as Liverpool. They've spent a lot of money on players. They have a lot of great players. And Manchester City could very well win the Champions League. That is within the realm of possibility. But what this match proved this weekend, and it's something I come to time and time again, which has been forgotten in a lot of places around world soccer and has been forgotten in so many places around sports, is that it's so much more than just talent, so much more than just money spent. To have success in business, in life, in sports, you need a plan. You need a way of doing things, a culture, especially when you're trying to get numerous talented people, a PR branch, ticket sales, an entire sports entity. When you're trying to get it all to operate successfully, you need culture. You need a way of doing things. You need leadership. And Manchester City has those things, I think, but they haven't done it as well as Liverpool. And Liverpool has figured this whole thing out this season in a way that if every team can model that, you're going to have massive success. And I keep mentioning, and I want to mention again, how Liverpool reminds me of a German national team that has won the World Cup. Every single time Germany wins the World Cup, they don't have the most talented player on the field. They beat Maradona. Didn't have the most talented player on the field. They beat Messi. Didn't have the most talented player on the field. In 1954, they arguably didn't have the 11 best players on the field. Hungary was dominant. But what Germany has figured out on the world stage that the Brazilians haven't figured out, the Italians haven't figured out, is soccer is so much a team game. And yet we treat the stars like basketball stars, where one basketball player, because there's only 5 players on the court, can affect everything, and they play offense and defense. While soccer, we treat stars and talent the same way we do in basketball, yet it doesn't impact wins and losses as much as we nearly think it does. We think it does because the teams that spend the most money and have the most talent have such a wide advantage over the teams that don't, because there is no draft, there is no getting better, there is no number one overall pick, there is no salary cap, there are no league rules. The best teams always get better in soccer. So we don't really notice how important organization is, how important process is, how important being a team is, how important all 11 guys working together for a purpose that's above themselves is, until we get into the national team realm. And that's what Germany has shown constantly. In 2014, it was a team, it was a unit, it was a machine. Now in 2018, it was a lot of guys that thought they were the best player, that thought they were a star, that wanted to be a star. And it got a little in their heads. And, German fans are hoping that they correct that moving forward, starting with the European Championships this summer. But when you get in your head like that and you're not a team and you're not a machine, yes, you'll have a lot of talent. Yes, you'll score a lot of goals. Yes, you'll win a lot of games. But you won't have success at the level your talent should bring you. And I think Man City has lost a little bit of that team, right? And I think they had way more talent than Liverpool last year, and they only won the league by a point. And Liverpool has combined now both money spent and money spent extremely smartly, right? The amount of value they're getting out of all their transfers is unbelievable. So they're spending just as much money as you. They're spending it smarter, finding great players at good value. And they have figured out how to get the team to play like a national team for each other for a greater purpose. There's no one player that outshines the other players. They've developed youth and experience. It's this gel, and it all starts with Jurgen Klopp and the way he runs and executes the Liverpool program. And Manchester City losing this weekend, I get it's one result, but their struggles this year in the Premier League, I think, highlight that. And what we see in La Liga, Real Madrid, Barcelona, highlight that. And we forget about that in world soccer because we think stars matter because the teams with stars win. But the reason the teams with stars win is because they have all the money and they have all the stars. And the best way to determine what's the best way of doing things is how does this team compare to that team in their way of doing business. And we go back time and time again throughout history, and the most successful teams in the Champions League against the other best clubs that can spend just as much money and have just as much talent, the most successful teams and clubs always have consistency, are always based around teamwork, are always based around something beyond themselves, and honestly, they don't always have the best player on the field. I think of Barcelona and their passing, their culture in the early 2010s. I think of Real Madrid uniting behind a star and a new manager to three-peat in the Champions League. And yes, they spent more money, but they had a process. They had a way of doing things. And they've continued that process, and it's allowed them to rebound from a bad year and be at the top of the Liga. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Real Madrid won the whole thing in the Champions League again this year. Because they have a process, a way of doing things. And Manchester City, to succeed at the levels at which their money suggests they should, at which their talent suggests they should, need to really develop that at the level Liverpool's developing that. And it just feels like Pep Guardiola a little bit short. There's a little bit of a undercurrent of, I don't even want to use the word of lack of success because they are successful. They're still one of the best clubs in the world, but they aren't as much of a unit. They aren't as much of a culture as Liverpool right now. And I know these words are floaty words that don't really have any concrete meaning in the world. And I understand that, and it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what that means. But in any good business, in any good social setting, in any good team where there's multiple people, having a culture, having a way of doing things, having a set of goals, uniting under something clearly is hugely impactful. And time again, it will win out at the end of the day. And especially in a sport where there's 11 people on the field. We forget that about soccer sometimes. We forget how important moving as a unit is and having shape and culture and being a team is. We think it's more basketball. And it's really more American football than it is basketball. And baseball's so weird, I'm not even going to toss it in this conversation, right? Because this is a bunch of one-on-one battles and statistical anomalies and running 162 simulations and can this guy get on base. It's It's a completely different animal. But in terms of fluid, timed sports, basketball, American football, and soccer is way closer to American football, where the conversation constantly is team. You need a defensive line. You need an offensive line, right? You need to do this together. You need to work together. You need to have a good coach, good quarterback. You need to, yeah. And in basketball is more, get LeBron, everything else will solve itself. And we put soccer closer to basketball. Oh, go buy this guy. Go buy this guy. Go get this one. And then everything will work out. Spend more money than everybody. Everything will work out. And it's actually closer to American football where let's do things right. Let's do things in a culture. Let's establish a way of doing things. Let's work as a team. Combine that with star talent, and that's how you're successful. On the other side of a break, an absolute machine in Germany has found its way back to the top. And a manager firing I actually liked has paid off. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Final segment on what has been an awfully fun show. It's the GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Podcasting live from the great city of Chicago. The thing about this city is in the winter like this, it's a nice 34-degree day. And I'm walking around downtown and I'm like, man, I love this city. And as soon as that thought entered my head that I love this city and I love living here, which I still do. But as soon as that thought entered my head, 30-mile-per-hour gust of wind that made my absolute bones shiver, smacked me right in the face. And I immediately went, oh, I kind of don't like this at all. But that's like universal justice, isn't it? Good thoughts followed by bad, right? Balance, things turn around. There's one thing that's consistent, though, in the Bundesliga. And that is Bayern being better than you. And FC Bayern Munich, who lost 5-1 under Niko Kovac to Eintracht Frankfurt, which is an absolute embarrassment. And the entire team was bailing on this manager, and it's one of those situations where you read into the details, and I'm 100% in favor of the move Bayern made. They brought in a Jupp Heynckes, who was the manager the last time FC Bayern Munich won the Champions League. They brought in a Jupp Heynckes prodigy, a Jupp Heynckes guy, a guy that Jupp likes the way he runs things, and he models himself after Jupp and Hansi Flick. And what's Hansi Flick done? He put Thomas Müller, a German great, a guy from Munich, back in the lineup. And the entire team gelled around him, gelled around his idea and the culture he set for the team. And Bayern Munich figured themselves out. And they've started winning games and winning them by large margins. 5-0 against Schalke. They picked up a 3-1 win this weekend. And all of a sudden, Bayern Munich, who was all the way in 5th place at one point, blink and, oh my gosh, they're back in first. I promise you, I have family in Germany. The entire country, at the end of the Rückrunde, which is the pre-round, the first 17 matches of the season before the winter break, actually, the Hinrunde, Rückrunde is what we're in now. Before that, I'm telling you, the whole country was celebrating the end of Bayern Munich. They had lost 5-1 to Frankfurt. They were way behind the league. Leipzig has Timo Werner. They won't sell him until the end of the year. And if he gets sold, he's probably going to Real Madrid. And Bayern is dead. Bayern is gone. The 7 straight German championships is finally over. And Hansi Flick comes in. They stabilize. They figure themselves out. They start blowing people out. And out of absolutely nowhere, the entire league is like, uh-oh, here they come. Here comes the most consistent team in the Bundesliga, the best team in the Bundesliga, the most talented team, the best cultured team in the Bundesliga, and everybody else peed right down their leg. Leipzig couldn't figure it out. Dortmund seems to be the only team that's not scared of them, but Dortmund sold so many players over the years that they just won't have the talent to compete with Bayern. Bayern Munich's in first, and I've seen this German race happen a lot of times. I would be unbelievably shocked if Bayern gave up this lead. A big reason for it is they've won it 7 straight times, and if you're Leipzig, can you really sit there in the locker room and go, you know what? This year's actually different. And Bayern Munich, who has an unbelievable goal differential since they brought this new guy in, they have way more talent than us. They will spend more money than us. They brought in a dude from Real Madrid off loan just, for fun. That won't even play much, but let's bring him in. A real talented guy. We'll bring him in. We'll bring him in for fun. Now they have the lead in the league. They've scored more goals, and we're going to catch them? We're going to win this thing? It's just not going to happen. Because Bayern Munich, it's overwhelming. It's terrifying for the rest of the Bundesliga. And they thought the Giants were slain. They thought it had happened. They had finally done it. They had beaten Bayern. And here comes the machine. Time and time again. I expect them to march to an 8th straight German title. I expect them to win it with a couple games in hand. Because right now, Bayern Munich is probably not going to get beat by anybody in Germany. Now, they've got a big match against Leipzig coming up. We'll preview that on the show, obviously. And Leipzig's got this opportunity to beat them, but boy, oh boy, you're at a mental disadvantage after they already passed you. You've had some disappointing results, and you're not in first anymore. Would have been a way different match if Leipzig were still in first place. Because if they were still at the top of the league, they could kind of make an argument in the locker room, we are better than them. But now you can't even point at the standings and say that, and you're a team that's already disadvantaged in the matchup anyway. Difficult times for the Bundesliga, not for Bayern Munich, though. And there's a real chance they win the treble. They got a Pokal match on Wednesday. That's the Cup in Germany. They're one of the favorites to win the Champions League. It really will depend on the draw. And they're going to win the Bundesliga. All indications say that 538 has them as a massive favorite right now. And knowing the Bundesliga, the last 7 years, it's been Bayern Munich. It's hard for me to imagine them not being at the top at the end of this all, which is amazing after they were so far behind. And it felt like that they had been slain, and it felt like this year was just not going to be the year for Bayern Munich. Tough to see. It's like when a really fast runner tripped at the beginning of a race, and you were a guy that was expected to finish like 3rd or 2nd, and he trips, and all of a sudden you get out to this big head start, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to win the race. Okay, run. Okay, I'm going to win the race. I'm going to win the race. And then you keep looking behind your shoulder. And this guy, this world-class sprinter that was supposed to win, he gets up, he dusts off, and now he starts running, and he starts gaining ground. He passed the guy in 7th place. He passes the guy in 6th place. Here you are in 1st place. You're looking behind your shoulder, and you're starting to panic. You're like, oh, God, he's just really moving fast. Man, okay, just focus. Keep moving. Oh, man, he just passed the guy in 5th. Oh, he just passed the guy in 4th. Uh-oh. There's no way you're winning the race. You're not going to be able to draw upon that energy to get over the finish line, because this guy is bearing down on you with even more fury than he was going to run before because he tripped at the head start. Bayern knows they have no room for error. They can't slip up. And it's just terrifying for the person at the top of the race, which now Leipzig has been passed, and they'll need to trip Bayern, if we want to keep the analogy going, to be able to pass them. But that'll bring an end to our show. Really appreciate you listening. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_soccer. Like us on Facebook, GSMC Soccer. This has been the GSMC Soccer Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. Check it out. A lot of great stuff on there. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. We will see you on Friday. A lot of fun stuff from the week to recap, and then a big weekend in soccer around the world, as it usually is this time of year, to preview on the next edition of the show. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.